We go to Venezuela, where the Public Prosecutor's Office reported the arrest on February 13th of citizen Evan Romero Gutierrez for crimes of fraud and conspiracy. In this regard, the statement informed the Public Prosecutor's Office of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela reports that on February 13th, Evan Romero Gutierrez was arrested at La Chinita International Airport in Maracaibo, and he had been wanted since May 26, 2025 for the crimes of fraud and conspiracy. The document added, it should be noted that this proceeding is not related to oil issues or activities related to that sector, as has been reported in various media outlets. On February 17, 2026, the preliminary hearing was held. In view of the age of the citizen under investigation and in strict compliance with constitutional procedural guarantees. According to the statement, the Public Prosecutor's Office also requested a substitute precautionary measure consisting of a reporting regime. This request was granted by the competent court. The Public Prosecutor's Office remains committed to the country's dialogue process. And in other news as well, Democrats in the U.S. Congress sent a new counter-offer to the White House and Republicans to reopen the Department of Homeland Security amid a partial shutdown that has lasted 4 days with no signs of an immediate agreement. On Monday night, Democrats offered a new proposal to restrict the actions of federal agents in exchange for an agreement to fund the department. According to spokesperson for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, funding for the Department of Homeland Security expired on Saturday after efforts to temporarily extend funding until September failed. Democrats blocked the measure last Thursday, arguing that it did not sufficiently limit ICE and CBP operations. 80 countries and international organizations condemn Israel's unilateral decisions and measures aimed at expanding its illegal presence in the West Bank. During a press conference, Riyad Mansour, the permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, delivered a statement in which the group said the decisions contradict Israel's obligations under international law and must be reversed immediately. The group expressed firm opposition to any form of annexation. The statement reiterated the rejection of all measures aimed at altering the demographic composition, character, or legal status of Palestinian territories occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem.
In Palestine, thousands of worshippers performed the Isha and Tarawih prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the first night of the holy month of Ramadan. Despite the restrictions imposed by the occupying forces, a crowd was able to access the sacred complex after the sighting of the waxing moon was confirmed. The day was marked by tension after the police broke into the mosque. The massive attendance of the faithful is seen as an act of resistance and faith in the face of the complex security situation in the region. Also, as part of the preparations for the holy month of Ramadan, Pakistani citizens go to markets to buy traditional foods for the occasions. Sellers reported an increase in demand for products associated with Ramadan, including spices and legumes. Citizens also prepare mosques to welcome the faithful, installing new lighting, cleaning, and conditioning the premises. The atmosphere in the streets combines spiritual devotion with family efforts to manage tight budgets. Hundreds of people gather at Taoist temples in China to take part in the traditional ritual of burning the first incense stick, which marks the start of the Lunar New Year. Amidst chants, drums, and the heavy scent of incense, citizens offered their prayers, focusing mainly on health and family harmony. The festival included the presence of local figures such as 95-year-old actress Lana Wong and colorful symbolic elements such as windmills for good luck. This year is especially significant because it is the year of the horse, a sign that, according to the devotees, promises prosperity and the fulfillment of personal wishes. The Cuban government continues the distribution of the solidarity aid shipment received from Mexico in the midst of the intensification of the U.S. economic and fuel blockade on the Caribbean island. According to the Ministry of Domestic Trade, the donation consisting of food and hygiene products will benefit people in the provinces of Artemisa, Habana, Mayabeque, and the special municipality of Isla de la Juventud, with priority given to children aged 0 to 13, people over 65, pregnant women and children, as well as vulnerable groups. In this regard, the authority assured the operation is being carried out with the utmost speed in the reception and distribution of the products, which will gradually arrive in the territories. On February 12, two ships sent by Mexico arrived in Havana with 114 tons of humanitarian aid to help meet the basic needs of the Cuban people in the complex energy scenario the island faces, aggravated by Washington's imposition of a fuel blockade on late January. Faced with the intensification of unilateral coercive measures by the United States against Cuba, the Caribbean island is developing an alternative to ensure food distribution and advance toward technological innovation. The Cuban Bread Company implemented a new measure that replaces the use of imported diesel with domestically produced manufactured gas. This adjustment seeks to reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels and mitigate the impact of the blockade. This new measure is a direct response to the fuel shortage facing the island as a result of coercion by the United States. On Tuesday, Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel received Argentine Congressman Juan Grabois, leader of Patria Grande Party, at the Palace of the Revolution. During the meeting focused on the defense of sovereignty and Latin American integration, Grabois expressed his solidarity with Cuba in the face of the U.S. blockade, describing it as brutal and illegal. He also warned that recent measures taken by the Trump administration constitute a crime against international law. For his part, the Cuban president highlighted the importance of the support of regional movements in the face of external pressure from Washington. The meeting concluded with a joint call for self-determination and harmonious coexistence among nations above ideological differences. Also, Russian presidential spokesman Dmitry Peskov reiterated on Wednesday his government's consistent opposition to the U.S. blockade against Cuba and reaffirmed that many countries in the world act the same way. This statement was reported by the Russian news agency TASS, which also informed that Moscow will soon begin delivering oil and petroleum products to the Caribbean island as humanitarian aid. The United States strengthened its blockade against Cuba in January, declaring its intention to overthrow the island's government by imposing a blockade on all supplies of fuel after it had succeeded in halting oil supplies from Cuba from Mexico and Venezuela. The U.S. administration also announced its intention to impose proportional import duties on goods from countries that dare to supply Cuba with fuel. In this context, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held a meeting with his Cuban counterpart Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla. At this occasion, Lavrov rejected accusations that cooperation between Russia and Cuba poses a threat to the U.S. or other countries. In addition, Moscow declared that it will continue to support Havana in defending its sovereignty and security. For his part, the Cuban Foreign Minister expressed that the island will continue to implement joint projects and agreements with Russia despite the difficulties. In this scenario, Bruno Rodriguez reaffirmed that the Cuban government is open to dialogue with any country on the basis of respect for self-determination. The Cuban foreign minister is expected to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin today.
Together with the majority of the world community, we call on the United States to show common sense and a responsible approach, and to refrain from plans for a naval blockade of the island of freedom. I want to reiterate the absolute unacceptability of the U.S. decree stating that Cuba poses a threat to U.S. national interest. And in the same decree, it is written that this threat is aggravated by your cooperation with us, with Russia, which this decree calls a hostile and malicious state.
Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez Parrilla warned about the deterioration of the international order as a result of the unilateral practices of the United States government.
We are concerned about the deterioration of the international order, which was already unfair and precarious. But today, it is being replaced by the practice of the United States government, by operations of expulsion and occupation of natural resources.
Ocupación de recursos naturales, transgresión total del derecho.
Total transgression of international law, ignorance of the United Nations, which threatens not only the current order, multilateralism,
el orden actual, el multilateralismo, la
the Organization of the United Nations and others, but also the sovereignty and security of all states without exception.
De todos los estados sin excepción. Y enfrentamos en Cuba.
Today we face an even greater threat in Cuba, which adds up to decades of blockade and which is now getting worse with the executive order that declares Cuba an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security.
Ahora con la orden ejecutiva que declara a Cuba una amenaza inusual y extraordinaria a la seguridad nacional y la política exterior de los Estados Unidos. Nosotros como
and foreign policy of the United States. As always, we will defend with all determination our independence and sovereignty. We will maintain our unwavering direction in search of greater economic efficiency.
Búsqueda de una mayor eficacia económica. Trabajaremos denodadamente como hasta ahora en la recuperación de nuestra.
We will work tirelessly, as so far, in the recovery of our economy. And at the same time, we will always be ready for a respectful dialogue on equal terms with any country.
We go now to Venezuela, where acting President Delcy Rodriguez received at Miraflores Palace the Qatari Prime Minister Mohamed Al Thani. Let's see. We're watching now live images from the receiving of Qatari Prime Minister Mohamed Al Thani at the Miraflores Palace in Venezuela. We are watching right now. He is walking to the doors of Miraflores Palace in Venezuela. We're watching him entering and greeting the acting president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez. We're watching now images of the meeting of President Delcy Rodriguez and the Prime Minister of Qatar, Mohamed Al Thani. He's, as we were saying, at Miraflores Palace right now, with the aim of strengthening ties with the Venezuelan government in areas such as trade, tourism, energy, and trade. Qatari Prime Minister Sheikh bin Abdurrahman Al Thani is in Venezuela for an official visit. Upon arrival, he was greeted by Foreign Minister Ivan Hill. Let's recall that Qatar has historically acted as a mediator between the United States and Venezuela, especially facilitating talks between the Venezuelan government and its opposition parties. We were seeing images from Venezuela where acting President Delcy Rodriguez welcomed the Qatari Prime Minister Mohamed Al Thani at the Miraflores Palace. This diplomatic act reaffirms the strategic alliance between Caracas and Doha, honoring the roots of cooperation forged under the administration of President Nicolás Maduro Moros, with the aim of strengthening ties in tourism, trade, and energy. This is all for the moment, but stay tuned to teleSUR English for more.
We go to Venezuela, where the Public Prosecutor's Office reported the arrest on February 13th of citizen Evanan Romero Gutierrez for crimes of fraud and conspiracy. In this regard, the statement informed the Public Prosecutor's Office of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela